Hi, Principal Marmalade. I found this amazing systematic review that suggests we need to invest in iPads now for the students in my integrated classroom.
Okay, that's fantastic. I'll share this article with the rest of the staff as well as Shania, the school board occupational therapist, whom I'm sure will have some valuable insight on what will work best for the students. We can discuss more in our staff meeting this Friday. Thank you everyone for being here. I hope you were all able to read the article Using iPods and iPads in Teaching Programs for Individuals with Developmental Disabilities by Kag O'Hara and team. That was brought to our attention by Mr. Pumpernickel, our grade 3 teacher. From my understanding, the system review covers several articles that look at the use of iPads, iPods, and related devices in teaching programs for individuals with learning disabilities.
Yeah, isn't it fantastic? Can you believe technology these days? This can really help my grade 3 students, Petunia, who has autism, and Mohammed, who has cerebral palsy, as they are not communicating effectively or reaching their full academic potential. Frankly, they just don't seem to be motivated.
This is a very interesting article. However, after critically appraising the systematic review with the Prisma tool, I found some areas of concern I'd like to bring to your attention.
What is critical appraisal, and what the heck does a prism have to do with this?
Critical appraisal is a process of reviewing a paper in order to determine if the information provided is of value, helping us to determine if the evidence is valid or relevant to a particular situation. In occupational therapy, it is an essential component of evidence-based practice, which requires the integration of the OT's clinical expertise with evidence from systematic research and the preferences or the goals of our patients. So in other words, before we make the decision to purchase these iPads, we need to appraise this paper to determine the research strengths, weaknesses, and overall relevance to Mohammed and Petunia. Although it is a time-consuming and does not always provide the easy or favorable answer, it helps us link research and practice. We can do this by using the Prisma checklist, which stands for Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis. It is a reliable, evidence-based tool comprised of a minimum set of guidelines for reporting in systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Although it does not gauge the quality of the systematic review, it will help prompt us to think about issues such as, was the research method appropriate for the questions? Were measures taken to reduce bias?
Why bother when the article has already been published and is peer-reviewed?
Unfortunately, you can't always take the results of a study at face value, even if it has been published. Critical appraisal allows us to carefully look at a piece of research in an objective and structured way to decide how valid it is compared to other research that has been published.
Ooh, this critical appraisal thing sure sounds important.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually brought a copy of the completed checklist to share with everyone. Why don't you take a look?
Okay, I think just by looking at this PRISM checklist, I can see it highlights some of the strengths I noticed in the article. First, in accordance to items 3 and 4, I agree the objectives and the rationale of the study was extremely clear and super relevant to our needs. This helped me understand the purpose of the study. Also, it seemed that all studies included were related to the use of iPod/iPad-based instruction for individuals with developmental disabilities. Lastly, I agree with items 8 and 9 that the systematic review provided a clear search strategy that will help us determine how to find each of the used articles.
Good observations! All of those things you mentioned are addressed in items on the Prisma. Another strength was that the article even made sure to use inter-observant agreement.
See? Doesn't it mean that it reduces bias effectively?
Well, let us begin to look at some of the limitations. For starters, all of the articles drew conclusions from a very small sample size, which leads me to question the reliability of the findings. The articles they chose may have been subjected to a type 1 error, which occurs when researchers report that a relationship exists when it in fact does not. Also, the small sample size would affect the external validity of the results in terms of its generalizability to our population of students.
Ooh, good point. That sounds like a doozy. Please continue, Shania.
If we look at the Prisma checklist, we can see that the review has not addressed the risk of potential biases across individual studies. For example, the primary author of the review used many of her own research studies to draw conclusions from.
Ooh, problematic.
Also, the researchers limited their study to include only English studies and ones that used Apple products, with no rationale for this eligibility criteria. This search method may have overlooked studies that could have strengthened or weakened the review's result. For example, there could have been studies that used technology products other than Apple as assistive devices.
What a great point! I didn't even consider that. Did you find any other weaknesses?
Indeed. Once the researchers found their 55 articles, they read the article's abstract to determine which studies to use for the review. If an article's abstract was missing key information, they may have overlooked an important article.
But isn't it common practice to screen articles based on their abstract?
Yes, it is, but is it best practice? Also, the inclusion of a review protocol is highly advantageous and increases the transparency of a review, ensuring that researchers do not make any changes after their initial search without appropriate rationale. In fact, item 5 on the Prisma requires you to indicate if a review protocol exists.
I don't recall the authors including anything about a protocol.
You're right, Principal Marmalade.
Golly gee, is there anything this review did right?
While critically appraising this article, I was able to highlight some strengths. The results section of the review included a clear overview of all the studies used, as well as a concise table summarizing results. The study's effectiveness was strengthened by the author's discussion of the limitations of individual studies. Discussions about factors that limited the study, such as a broad age range and gaps in types of skills targeted, allow readers to interpret the results with due regard to the study's weaknesses. The author's frankness facilitates the improved design of future research on this topic.
That sounds promising. Is there anything we can take away from this study and apply to our students?
Well, I'm glad you asked. It does seem that incorporating iPods, iPads, and related technological devices into the education system for individuals with developmental disabilities could have potential value. Despite the weaknesses, the article findings suggest that our students could benefit from learning skills, such as spelling through instructional videos delivered from the iPad.
That's perfect! Some of my students have expressed not being able to keep up with the lessons in class because they are distracted or they feel overwhelmed by the content. They could keep up by re-watching some of my lessons on the iPad itself.
Yes, iPads have also shown an improvement in communication skills, which can be transferable to many occupations and potentially allow for greater engagement and participation in school. Since iPads help enable these skills, it may help to motivate our student to continue to participate in class, complete homework, communicate efficiently, and enjoy leisure activity.
And I remember reading that iPods and iPads can help reduce the stigma that these students may face, which is great because bullying is something kids should not have to live with.
Yes, many of our students have iPads at home, and the use of iPads eliminates the need to carry larger assistive devices. iPads might be a great way to help Petunia and Mohammed connect with their classmates and feel less isolated. iPads are hip with the kids.
There do seem to be more benefits than there are costs. Maybe we could revisit some of the goals the students have and see if it's in line with the benefits of using an iPad.
I know Petunia wanted to get an A+ on her next spelling test.
Wow, that does sound like there is potential for these devices to be beneficial in our classrooms. Thanks for bringing it to my attention, Mr. Pumpernickel. But I do think that we need to proceed with caution and look at more research before making a decision on this investment, as we're not really sure of any negative risks associated with iPad use as well. Maybe we can consider a trial period for our classroom and see how well the students respond to it. But first, let's talk to parents to get their consent for its use in the classroom. We need to make sure they are involved.
Great idea!
That really was a great discussion. I think this article also has some implications for future research as well. The article only reviewed articles from 2008 to 2012, and with how fast advancements in technology are being made, I'm sure there is a need for another systematic review of iPads and teaching programs from research done in the past 5 years. Not to mention that this systematic review has some positive implications for rehabilitation service delivery to number of students who are homeschooled or live in remote places where location is often a barrier. Ultimately, this systematic review may provide a good rationale for research into the use of iPads in other rehab settings. This could really change occupational therapy practice in the modern age. How exciting for future research!